Durban, and a heavy police contingent kept a watchful eye on the procession. Members of the organization complained that undocumented foreign nationals are taking their jobs, and they demanded that authorities implement South Africa's immigration laws. A memorandum was handed to police and Home Affairs officials at the police station. Well, the issue of migration, especially of those travelling from Zimbabwe to South Africa, has been thrust into the spotlight again as violence and murder engulfed Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg, in recent days. To understand the background and build understanding, our political analyst Igbo Mandaza and spokesperson for ZANU-PF in South Africa, Kennedy Mandaza. Good evening and welcome to the pair of you. If I could start with you, Professor Mandaza. One of the biggest issues that comes up consistently, and this is a cyclical sort of happening in South Africa, for many years now, in terms of, Afrophobia and the fear of the other in a way. What are your observations of not only how this incident and the events of this last week have played out, but more historically speaking here in South Africa?
Well, first and foremost, it's very peculiar to South Africa, Afrophobia, extremely peculiar. We do have instances of discrimination against foreigners in various countries across the region. But this amounts to no more than kind of jocular exchanges, but not to the extent of killing another person. So one has to interrogate the South African historical backdrop, but also the political architecture right now, which allows in my view, for a level of tolerance for this kind of behavior. And to have politicians and even the ANC Youth League itself leading this kind of pack is disgraceful, to say the least.
I'd like to tease out a little bit of what you're saying, talking about this being a peculiarity in South Africa where it might be more perfunctory in other countries, as you say, it could be something in passing. I'd like you to go a little bit more into some of the reasons that you just headlined there, our historic past with apartheid. What are some of the other pathologies you think are responsible for this kind of outlook that you're observing in South Africa?
I mean, the main pathology is historical in South Africa, the national question, and the extent to which the apartheid era fanned and promoted so-called ethnic differences. And the Bantustan era is just a few decades away. And that is the background, in the sense that, and I heard President Ramaphosa make a very profound statement, and likewise Julius Malema, that this tendency of targeting foreigners, so-called foreigners, can end up with South Africans turning on each other very easily, and it has happened before. So it's a scaring feature, a spectre for South Africa itself in terms of the national question. And to the extent that this happens against foreigners, and we saw this in previous Afrophobia or xenophobic outbursts, where people from the north of South Africa were targeted as if they were foreigners too. So really the warning is clear, and I'm glad that the President Ramaphosa and Mr. Julius Malema have pointed out this, and as a kind of a warning to South Africans themselves. But of course, for us, for me in particular, I'm concerned to know two things. One is, why are Zimbabweans in particular a target? What is it? Is it that there is a conflation of being Zimbabwean and being foreign? Is it because of the proximity of Zimbabwe to South Africa, historically, in the same way that there will be proximity between the Zulus and the Xhosas in the southern part of South Africa? What is it? I think researchers have to interrogate this more closely.
And there is some research, in the space, but clearly, either through the problem of not connecting some of those findings, which debunk some of the myths about having people who are not, native into your own country, debunking the myth that they are, not productive or don't play an important role in actually enriching their new host country. And the question is, why is that sentiment or that research not disseminated more widely, or why does it not replace some of the prejudices that people have? I think is where your statement is going. We'll circle back to that in just a second, Professor Mandaza. Kennedy, let's just maybe come. Oh, we lost Kennedy. Oh, I'm just hearing that we lost Kennedy. Okay, hopefully we'll try and get him back. Well, then to pick back up, Professor Mandaza, how do we connect what you're sharing now, the research that does exist in the space, the research, of course, as you say, that still needs to be done, to communities from whom we are hearing who say, this is all sophistry, from people who are academics, don't live in our communities, aren't experiencing and seeing what we're experiencing and seeing. How do you break that or how do you, remove that disconnection and that chasm?
Well, specifically, what experience are they talking about? Is the experience crime? Then, as Chief Justice Mohe said yesterday, crime has no nationality. And as it turns out, it appears that Nyati was a case of mistaken identity. The crime committed was actually committed by a South African. So what experiences are these vigilantes talking about? And I saw this young man from the EFF make a clear distinction between vigilantism and communities. He made it very clear that vigilantes are criminals, nothing less than that, and that they have nothing to do with the communities in which they live. So I think you need to interrogate your own question. What experiences are they talking about?
Well, we can only go on what we hear, Prof, and that is, people talking about jobs. And as we're speaking, actually, some questions coming through. What about the real people on the ground affected by all of this? It's a recurring sentiment. All I'm saying to you is, yes, there are reams of research. We had Professor Friedman on yesterday talking about, the notion of competition for jobs being mythical, the notion that, people who come to South Africa from foreign lands don't enrich the country. There are reams of research that prove contrary. I'm asking about the disconnection between that body of evidence and the lived experience of some people who say, but my job is at threat. If I'm in, X or Y sector, I have to compete with foreign nationals for my job. How do we get them to adjust their point of view when they say that their experience is in direct contradiction of that view?
I think education on the part of the political leadership in the country, education through the media, like yourselves. Clearly, I agree with Friedman. It's a myth that foreign Africans are taking jobs of locals. We're doing a study right now on the structure of Zimbabwean diaspora in South Africa. It's very clear that there are two broad indications. One is that, of course, the Zimbabweans on the lower end of the labor market are fulfilling tasks which South Africans themselves don't appear to want to take. That's the first. And this is a feature in most countries. UK, for example, UK forgets that it brought in immigrants from the West Indies in the 50s because there was not enough labor in the UK. Likewise, in South Africa, one has to understand that there are jobs which are being done by foreign Africans, which South Africans themselves are not particularly attached to. The second is that, with respect to the Zimbabwean diaspora, they appear to be filling in the void left by the attrition of white skills, which skills dominated the South African economy, both public and private. And you can see this, that your health and education sectors, the financial sectors, the number of Zimbabweans therein is enormous, not to mention the fact that 75% of Zimbabwean skills and professionals are outside the country. It's an enormous number. We can talk about that another day, but I think these are some of the indications. And to answer your question, I think one needs to educate the public, and the media should do its work in highlighting these features I'm talking about. And indeed, to reverse what has become more or less a kind of a traditional, or what I call it the peculiarity of South Africa. We simply have to do a lot of work to change this trend.
It seems to be not only the volume of work that we have to do, Professor Mandaza, but also the complexity and the nuance of that work that is needed. Because on the one hand, you have a political class who, again, there's conventional wisdom and writing around, who seem to be fomenting or not taking the opportunity to use those leadership positions to create and execute the policy that does not leave people vulnerable, leave matters for people to resolve amongst themselves, but creates, clear laws, clear policies, so that things are managed in a structured way. So that's one piece. The other piece, as you say, is, what the psychological effects of our past have had on us, and that's perhaps, deeper work that has to be done as we pursue the project of social cohesion. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree entirely. And I just want to make the point, as part of the process to which I have made reference, they need to educate our populations across the region, Southern Africa in particular, because, some of us were involved in the formation of the protocol on freedom of movement of people in the SADC region in the 1980s already. And significantly, Zimbabwe and South Africa have not endorsed that protocol. And this is in sharp contrast to the other regions of Africa. ECOWAS, for example, have an ECOWAS passport, freedom of movement of citizens of ECOWAS. And more recently, the East African Community, which DRC has now joined, even though it's still a member of SADC. All you need in the East African Community is your ID. And you can move freely between the countries, the 7 countries, and get employment at will, And this is happening in other regions. Why can't it happen in our region? It's a serious issue that needs to be a serious interrogation.
Well, if I gave you the opportunity to answer your own question, why in your observation, is it not happening here?
It's a combination of those historical factors I referred to. It's a combination of the recent history of apartheid. It's a combination of the exceptionalism that Southern Africa has always tried to project vis-a-vis the rest of Africa, that somehow we're different. We are more developed than the rest of Africa, and therefore we need to be more defensive of those gains made under settler colonialism. As horrible as that sounds, sadly, it is one of the features, this Southern African exceptionalism, which is driving us down backwards, not forwards, with respect to Pan-Africanism, with respect to regional development, with respect to the dream of African unity.
I only wish we had more time, Prof, to tease out that particular theme about where we sit, not only in the region, but across the continent as Africans. And hopefully we will create an opportunity for that dialogue to go ahead. It's a crucial one, it must be had. We really do appreciate your time and insights. Political analyst Igbo Mandaza.